7 years, Kamil. 7 years I've been trying to get you on social media. I've known you for that long, and if I had to count the number of people that have impacted me in a way that has completely changed my life and outlook on my entire life, and if I had to count it on one hand, I'd pick you twice. Like, you're really that valuable to me. In many ways, you were my best kept secret. And
Huh.
it's finally time to bring you out. And I don't know what happened, but something finally convinced you in the seventh year of our friendship to get on social media. But I'm so excited and honored to be the one that's premiering you to the world as someone that is finally going to be sharing your insights. What is it is in 7 years of trying to convince you that finally made you decide to come on here and share your story?
7 years has really been that long. I can't believe it, and I'm flattered as well and honored to be here. Well, I think like it was just a combination of a lot of things. I mean, we all know the situation we're in, but also I had some terrible tragedies along the way, and it kind of like woke me up. I felt like most of my life I've been kind of asleep. It's so cliche to say woke, but I really was just living on autopilot. And even within those 7 years too, sometimes I'd get insights, but I wouldn't actually like think about where they came from or what I actually think. And then I would live in my own head, but not actually be present and actually think about what's going around me. So once I realized that I was just repeating this pattern over and over again, took me 7 years maybe.
Yeah.
Actually, it took me more like 28.
Yeah.
But finally, I realized that it's time to stop. And when I was talking with people, I realized that there is potential for change. And I started small with myself, and then eventually with my friends too. Having little conversations, but be asking like the tough questions, asking more deeper questions, like what do you think about that? But also, more importantly, why do you think that way?
Wow. And you have been a real pioneer of change. Since I've known you, one of the statements I hear you say very frequently is that we can do better. And I love that statement because it realizes that there is no time to get comfortable and take your foot off the gas. As you start making progress, you can start thinking about what is the next thing I can do to continue improving. And I love that. And over the 7 years that I've known you, it's an honor to not just say I know your story, but I've actually got a chance to witness that firsthand as I got to get to know you over the years. And I think back about the first year that I met you, it was what you consider
Yeah.
to be one of the darkest years of your life. And I remember that when we used to spend time together, a memory that comes to mind is you and I were at a friend's house party.
Yeah.
And I think we had like 30 people in that house party. And then somewhere along the way, I just noticed that you weren't your head wasn't in it, right? Like you weren't celebrating the joy of what was happening as much as everyone else was. And I remember that you and we walked out to the front porch and we sat down and chatted. Now, this was an interesting time in my career because I was doing a lot of public speaking. There's a lot of people that were reaching out to me and they were like, hey, can you help me out with my situation? And usually I know the answers. Usually I'm like, oh, you just got to market yourself better or you got to rebuild or reinvent yourself. Everything I was talking about back then was my answers. But we sat in that porch and I was just getting to know you. So it was very early in
Yeah,
our friendship,
yeah.
which is what makes it extra crazy. But we sat in that porch and you opened up to me about something very, very personal. And I remember that as much as I will usually be the guy that has the answers, for the first time, I actually had to check myself. I said, Mahfuz, get your shit together. Don't pretend like you know the answer to this problem. And for the first time, I opened my mouth and I said, Kamil, I wish I knew what to say to you, but I actually have no idea. And I also followed it up by saying that I want to help. I just don't know what to do. Can you tell me what I can do to help? And I think in many ways, it was that honesty that allowed us to be as close as we are for 7 years and grow together. Do you want to talk a little bit about what was happening during that time that you consider being the darkest moment? And I'd love to kind of spend our time today diving into what you've done since that
Right.
day to bring yourself into the positive life that you're into now.
Right. So there's a lot of context we should bring up. The fact that actually we've only known each other, I think, 1 month at that time.
Yeah,
About
very
1 month,
early.
right? And to be honest, it's something I've only repeated maybe twice before, and it was really crazy. So the context as well should be mentioned that I just came after my second hip surgery. I was injured, and I've been taking, well, Oxycontin for pain, and I had to increase my dose because I got addicted. And I started taking, like, I don't even remember how many milligrams, but it was way too much, over twice or even three times the dose.
Yeah.
And I would also mix it with alcohol in that party, for instance, or even with lorazepam, which is a benzodiazepine, and those two shouldn't mix, as well as the alcohol. So I was going through a period of my life where, I wanted to become a cop. I wanted to stay in the military reserves, but I couldn't because of those injuries. And I had to reevaluate my whole life because I had to switch careers. And thinking about everything that happened and what I wanted to do moving forward, I was so lost. I couldn't think of where to go. I lost my ability to be physically fit, which I loved at the time. I was addicted. I was an alcoholic as well. And I was socially anxious. I was also taking SSRIs because I was depressed. And I was just trying to find a way to make it comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the side effects of the SSRIs was I just felt nothing. I felt like a zombie. And then so to offset that, getting high on the Oxycontin it just felt like peace. But I was doing that every day for a long time, and I don't even remember I do remember our conversation, but after that, I don't remember the night. And that would happen a couple times. But I guess, what I should mention is the conversation we had was about something that happened very early in my childhood that time to time, I wonder if I really got over it.
Yeah.
But I hate being the victim. But when I was about 7 years old, I was held back in school. Well, I wasn't held back, but I wasn't reading well because my first language was Polish, and I learned English basically by going to school. And I was placed in reading recovery, and a lot of the times I would have to stay in for lunch. And the woman that was taking care of me, we would often, sit in her office and we would be alone. And it's hard to say, and it's really hard to tell what she did, but there was one time where she said, she put her hands up on my legs. I can't really do it here, but she dragged them up, and she said, "You can't tell anyone about this," and then she just and it's crazy. I only said that to twice before to other people. One to my friends, but it was just passing that I was molested as a kid, right? But the second was my psychiatrist, and his advice to me at the time was, "Don't tell anyone." And
That's nuts.
but you know what? It was good advice.
Was it?
Yes. At the time, because I didn't trust anyone.
Okay.
And then I would also look for. I would focus so much on the reaction that I would just assume things. I would be naturally paranoid. Be like, "Oh well, he didn't come for me the way I wanted to 100%. So that means he hates me." It would be silly things like anxiety and paranoia come in. And a lot of people have that same issue.
Is it worrisome that someone at that age is being encouraged to not actually resolve the issue at hand, but rather keep it to themselves and allow themselves to keep it in, almost like putting a lid on something that's heating up inside of them. Isn't that concerning for someone long term rather than trying to resolve and actually deal with it?
Yeah, I would think so. You're right. I think in that particular instance, I don't. Psychiatrists aren't really trained to actually do the psychoanalytical part of therapy. Let's say they know basics, but some of them are like trained to do it. Some of them aren't, and maybe he wasn't trained to do it. But also, I think he was a very smart one, and he knew me pretty well because he would actually talk to me instead of just ask me how am I doing with medications. Here's your next dose. See you later. He actually did talk, but in my particular case, what I can say is that almost it kind of encouraged denial,
Got it.
and then that denial, at least, it didn't feel like it came out in other ways. It might have, I don't know, but I think now I'm feeling the effects.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to me that you were encouraged to keep it to yourself, and the reasoning you said was because you really felt like you could trust anyone, or if so, maybe just a few couple people that maybe you can list out. I met you only for a month.
Yeah.
And
it's
I don't know what
crazy.
happened, but I respected your honesty so much. And I'm even respecting like the fact that we just started our conversation on this for the first time on camera, on microphone, on a
Yeah.
podcast and a video platform. And here you are completely transparent, which is so rare these days and so refreshing that you're willing to come out and share something right off the bat without care of who's watching it, hoping that you can make a positive impact in someone else's life. But let's start with that first. We just met. We recently connected. We were at a house party, which some would argue is not maybe the best
Yeah,
circumstance
exactly.
for the conversation that we
Definitely not.
had.
Yeah.
What is it that made you open up in that specific night, especially after knowing someone for such little time?
Yeah. Before I go into that, I should also say, if you ever had some kind of experience like that, you should definitely see a professional and talk to them about it.
Yes.
Don't take my advice. I am not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. But yes, how was it that I told you that? And I often wonder that myself. But you know what? From the moment that we met the first time, I told you this once before that I thought you were too good for me. Like I thought, like in the sense that I'd be like, oh, I'm only gonna see this guy once. He's never gonna be my friend. And hey,
Who would have thought?
yeah, who would have thought?
And it's funny because we joke about it, about the fact that I had the same thoughts when I met you. I was like, this guy is like, crushing it, has a background in the military, studying medicine, like wants to be a cop, talking to me about all these things that changed the way I was thinking about life. In the first month of knowing you, like I was in the same boat, my friend. I was like, I have no idea if I'm even in the same realm, like same
come on.
circle as this guy. So it was very fascinating for us to look back and think about how
Yeah.
we both kind of thought that way, yet we had that mutual respect with each other.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, like over time that developed, and you quickly became my closest friend. And I mean, in context of when we met, I had friends I've known for. Let's see, we met when I was like 21, 20-ish.
Mm-hmm.
So I had friends I've known for already like 8 years that I was still close with, and like within that month, just like we connected on the like same ideas. We wanted to improve ourselves. We worked hard. I feel like we have also like similar core values and traits, and we would discuss them. And it wouldn't be like the kind of like, you like this, yeah, kind of thing. It would be, why do you like this? Like, what are you doing? What's your next step? And you always push for the next step. And a lot of people find that a bit intimidating, but I think it's just because they aren't putting in the work and they're like making excuses for themselves. And you kind of also held me accountable, which kind of pushed me to grow even faster. And I love that. And we bonded over so many things.
Yeah. I think you and I, one thing that we've recently started reflecting back on and finally found like a common reoccurrence of why we've been friends and this close for this long was the fact that we were both students of growth. we both, every single
Yeah.
year that we've known each other, we were always challenging each other to be better at something. Sometimes it was fitness, sometimes it was in the social life, sometimes it was going out and meeting a girl, right? Like it was
Yep.
always different things that we would always talk about in how we could better each other as human beings. And I thought that was really fascinating to
Yeah.
me. And my favorite environment on the conversations that we have is all about how to better each other. And to
Yes.
me, that's very interesting. And it makes me think a lot about the circles that I have around myself. You know, to me, the circle that I've built for myself, I would say over the last 10 years, has been basically the remaining winners inside of a race that we were running. So, you know, I'm frequently on stage or speaking in a webinar or speaking to people on social media, and I give out a lot of advice, a lot. Like I give
Yeah.
out my best material for everything I've ever shared, where I'm literally doing whatever I can to really root for them to win. And it's very discouraging when you're rooting for 100 people to win and maybe one comes out on the other side. And actually, not that they didn't win, like I'm not just saying that the one person won, I'm saying the one person actually followed through with the advice.
Yeah.
And whether or not they win is a different story. But what happens when you start doing it thousands of times or speaking to 1,000 people is that you're left with about 10 or 15 people that made it out to the other side. When you befriend only those 10 to 15 people, your circle is superstars. Like you have
Yeah.
monsters in your circle that are actually trying to grow and following through with ideas. And that's kind of how I've developed myself over the years in building the friendship that I have. And you have, you know, we had a great conversation last week, and you know,
Right.
I almost feel like the title of this episode should be the number 7, because not only did we know each other for 7 years, we spoke for 7 hours last week.
Oh yeah, it
Right?
was 7 hours. Yeah.
7 hours, and maybe even 7 days ago. Like who knows? There's definitely another 7
Yeah.
in there somewhere. And it was a fascinating conversation, because one of the things we talked about was, what is the difference? What is the difference between someone who's at their lowest point? Let's say Kamil in year 1 when we spoke. And what is the difference between people that become like you, that rise like a phoenix, versus the other side of people that actually accept that as like, hey, my life sucks. I'm gonna blame the world, and I don't want to like ever be happy. I'm not gonna make the attempt to actually get out of this and grow. You know, as someone that has been the complete polar opposite, that you've actually grown and you rose like a phoenix, and you've really made a big impact in the community since. And especially for me, like a lot of people don't see it, right? Like when I come out there and they're like, oh man, how'd you become who you are and where did you get motivated? A lot of people don't see behind the curtains of like, this is why, you know?
Yeah.
Like I have a friend that also pushes me. So for me to actually be able to bring you out and now being like, here he is, guys, like almost like show and tell today. Like, hey, gather around friends.
Oh, yeah.
Like here is a guy that's actually shaped my motivation. What do you think is the underlying reason between why some people do rise up and some people just stay down?
Oh wow, no pressure, right? But yeah, I'm curious about your opinion after I give mine. I think they haven't suffered enough, or what I think is they lack the self-reflection and actually the honesty with themselves, because we can always do better. But as soon as you have someone that is like, well, it's their fault, and they're not looking for their own responsibility or how they even approach the situation in a better way, then they're stuck blaming everyone else, and
Right.
they're ignorant. It's almost a sort of denial, I would assume. And I think that comes from maybe lack of experience, or even just it's really tough to find the right words for it. But the way I feel is that the people that blame other people are usually the ones that that really haven't put an honest effort either.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, let's spend some time dissecting this, because I don't actually know the answers to either. So maybe we can use this episode as our platform to dissect this together. I don't know the answers about other people, because the reality is I don't know their stories. But what I do know is what drives me, and what you know is what drove you. And maybe if we both share that component, we can kind of see if there's a pattern.
Sure.
I think if I had to put a theory out there, and my hunch is that I think the upbringing and the root cause of what sparks inside of you is the fundamental reason of whether or not someone does something about it or not. Like if you have, you know, in our economy today, they use the word why. The word why is used a lot. Like, what is your why? Discover your why. The reason, like the why will allow you to overcome all your issues. And I think what they're trying to explain when they use the word why is the spark inside of you that reminds you frequently about what you're doing and the reasoning and the why you should get up and do something about it. And I think about my upbringing, and my upbringing had a lot to do with just the way that I was raised, but also the sacrifices that was made from the generations before me.
Right.
We lived in the poorest country of that time, Bangladesh. Average income was $500 a year. Average.
Yeah,
$500 a year.
that's crazy. Yeah.
And it's very hard living a life down there, but somehow during what was happening with the different economies, my parents saw the opportunity to abandon that country completely and bring us down to Canada to start our life over for better education and better opportunities. And they lived there all their life. They moved between Bangladesh and Saudi Arabia, but they lived there all their life, and they had families there. They had jobs there. My dad had a very secure job. Actually, he was one of the higher income earners in that average that I just gave you. But he gave it all up. And she gave it all up to jump on a plane and fly over here and start from scratch. I'm a little kid. I have no idea why any of this is happening. I have no idea that what the economy is like in any of these countries. I don't know why the Canadian economy gets so much light. But then when I got older, I started realizing that they actually gave up a good life, like a comfortable life, to live a hard life as a result of me having better opportunities to be who I am today. And they left everything. They had no friends. My mom speaks very little English, even today. From all the years I've been in this country, her English is not great at all. Yet they gave all that up for me to come here and start a fresh life. Every time that I have bad days, I think about no matter how bad my day is, it's not worse than what they went through.
Yeah.
And then I ask myself, who am I to complain? Why am I going to complain it? And then I also ask myself, could I look my mom in the eye and tell her I'm giving up on her for everything they gave up? So those things burn inside of me, and whether you call it the why or the burning desire or whatever phrase you want to use, that's the mentality that operates in the back of my mind that makes me say, I can do better. I should do better, and I will do better. So to me, if I had to pull out a theory, I think the difference between me and someone else is it's very easy to be comfortable here. And some people are raised here, some people are born here, and they might have gone through challenging things like heartbreak. I'm not going to undervalue heartbreak because I've gone through it too, and there's a lot of life lessons there that I'm excited to dissect with you in a second. But I still think that those things are not everlasting in the back of their mind to keep them going for years, decades, and all their life. What are your thoughts about that and your backstory that maybe resulted in why you pushed yourself as hard as you did?
I agree with you with the core values. One, you remind yourself of your core values and then be like, I'm doing this because this is important to me. Like, that definitely keeps, you can say, that fuels you to keep pushing harder. And when you really need to dig deep, that's where you can go to get it. However, my parents were also immigrants, and they came from Poland at a time where there was communism, where they had to line up, and sometimes they would get a chocolate bar once every 2 weeks if they're lucky, or if they had to, get a new part for a washing machine, they would have to wait for days in line, and they came out of a corrupt country to come here. However, the difference is, when I was young, I didn't recognize or appreciate their sacrifice. But also, they came as refugees, and they had a kind of privilege to get a better life themselves, where, as your parents, they had a pretty good life there, and they came here and started from scratch. Granted, my parents also started from scratch, but the difference in my case is, when I was a kid growing up, I had no responsibility, almost nothing. I had no chores. I didn't even wash dishes until I was 15. And
Live like a king.
Yeah, exactly.
King Kamil.
Exactly. But you know what they say, right? Soft times make soft people,
Yep.
right? So I didn't have that. And I had to kind of learn everything on my own because my parents took away my responsibility, let's say, because they didn't want to impose the same responsibility they had back there, which was insane. But I kind of feel like in that regard, there is a, there are some people here as well that also come from immigrant families, and they have the same thing where they're just living comfortable lives, and they still don't know how to dig deep, or they still don't know that they're living comfortable lives, and they feel entitled.
Right.
And that's where I kind of find it hard to say
Yeah.
where that drive comes from.
Yeah, and like opportunities vary from person to person when they come here. So I wonder if a lot of the entitlement also comes with the fact that they were given better opportunities right off the get-go. And as a result of that, they feel like it's owed to them. Or, some immigrants are not struggling immigrants. Like some of them come in from Dubai and they're loaded,
Oh, yeah.
right? Like they're already okay. When I used to work at Tim Hortons back in the days, there was a couple that flew in from Japan, and they came in and got a job there. But on the first week of working at Tim Hortons, the husband drove to the head office of Tim Hortons and dropped a check and said, I want to buy a location, right? Because he can. And he decided that he was too good to work as a baker. Like he had the mindset that I shouldn't be doing this. He was talking about his education. He actually had a fit. He threw the broom down in mid sweep. At least finish the job. At least clear the floor,
exactly.
or at least sweep while ranting. He dropped the broom and he said that I shouldn't be doing this. I have this education. I have this success. I have this much in the bank. And when the Tim Hortons franchise said we are refusing to give you a location until you can prove that you can run the company, he gave up. He turned away from the dream because he had that mindset like, hey, I don't care, I'll find something else. And he probably thought I'll find something better. And that changes the mentality a lot. And I think that opportunities that are provided, it makes a big difference. And the reality is there are opportunities out there for everybody. Sometimes you get it easy by luck. Sometimes you're in the right location or in the right region at the right industry at the right time. Or sometimes you're actually going out there and finding it. You're hunting for those opportunities. You have the mindset of building. You're not waiting for something to be small.
Yeah.
And you have been a real builder in the way that you've built yourself. You have a lot of different passions. You have a lot of different philosophies. You're always studying. You're always researching the next philosophy, and you're challenging it not only between yourself, but also with friends. For a lot of the people, we started the show by talking a little bit about the darkest days. There's some people right now that are watching this that are maybe experiencing something along that line, if not the same feelings. What did you do? Like if we had to get a little practical, when it came to building yourself, what did you start doing that you would say was the first step that resulted from moving away from the dark into the light?
The first one had to acknowledge that I have a problem. And also that if I have this problem, and it's been like that for, in my case, years, then I'm probably not an expert on it. And I'm probably making it, I'm improving slowly, but maybe I need help. And what that is, help can come from a form of, like a professional, a friend, whatever. But what I found was just change. Thinking about, I need to change something, at least one thing, right? And if it's, in my case, I need to repair or fix something, why not start out with something small, like making sure the environment around me isn't as cluttered as my mind. So clean that. And then start setting little tiny goals. Like always look at the little things as achievements. Like making your bed first thing in the morning takes maybe 10 seconds, maybe long for some people, but in the military, that's what we did. That's like one of the first things we do. And that's one task of the day done, right? And then you're like, oh, okay, that was easy. Let's do another task. Okay. And then you just get the momentum there. And then you start seeing this kind of momentum building. And from that, you start getting more confidence in your ability to actually accomplish things. And then you start taking on more challenges. The best example I could give is when I had social anxiety. I actually, even as social phobia, it was to the point where I actually got a panic attack from walking up my street, the street I always go, just because I saw someone in a window of a house. I'm like, holy shit, he's judging me, and oh my god, he must think like I'm a stupid teenager. He probably thinks I'm gonna smoke drugs. He's probably gonna tell my parents,
Oh
and then
my
what? And then my
gosh.
parents are gonna find out. Then they're gonna yell at me, and then I'm gonna scream and cry, and then I might like hurt myself. Like it just, you catastrophize everything.
Yeah, it's so crazy because it was so well hidden when I met you. Like I had no idea that that was a thing until you pointed out.
Yeah.
And even when you pointed out, I have to just assume you're experiencing it because I still don't see it.
Yeah. Well, I had the, I guess, advantage that and it's not really an advantage. I just shut down, right?
Yeah.
So then, like, I just become completely emotionless, and I go retreat in the back of my head, and then I make it worse. I repeat the same negative feedback loops. So I had to stop it.
Rewired in
And-
many ways, yeah.
Yes. And the first thing, I had the help of a psychologist at the time, and my first homework task was to look at people in the street, like walk by, look at someone in the street, and then record their reaction, right? And it started simple as,
What do you mean by record? Like,
Like-
you're busting out a camera phone up to their face and seeing
oh
what they
yeah,
look?
definitely, being like, you're on camera, motherfucker. But no, like it was just something simple, like right. It was literally a happy face or a frowny face.
Oh, really?
Right, and
Wow.
it meant in the sense, was it a positive experience? Was it a negative? Oh, and it was also a neutral face, right? Or was it just neutral, right?
The little grim face with the straight line?
Yes, just a
Yes.
straight line, and that was the thing. And it was just to teach myself that little social interaction can be, positive, negative, neutral. And why did it become negative or positive or neutral? Most of the time it's neutral because I just looked at them. They might look at me, I look away, but at least I did it, right? And then that's how it started. Then I upped the number. Then I would smile. Then I would say hello. Then I had to make a random conversation. And what it would be is I would ask for directions to some place. Just a place I already know, but just directions, just to have that little thing. Then to build on that. And then that's when I started learning about how to talk to women, because I had zero experience. So I was practicing on getting phone numbers, or at least like talking to girls, because that was just an
The
extra
interactions,
layer.
yeah. And that's like the first step, right? Like
Yes.
you're already getting your foot in the door of like, hey, I feel comfortable having a conversation with
Yes.
them. And some people don't realize how much goes into that, like how
Yes.
much anxiety needs to be controlled into going into that. I get it.
Yeah, and normal people have like anxiety when they approach the opposite sex, but like I'm so messed up that
amplified.
That it's amplified. But even the littlest interaction, which was making eye contact, and God forbid they look at me back, was terrifying.
I remember,
to me.
yeah.
So
yeah.
it started with something that simple, was just making eye contact, and then evolved to something normal, well, normal-ish, and that's the thing. Little baby steps, but it has to be in a positive direction, and you have to look at it through a neutral lens, and that breaks that negative feedback loop, because whenever you feed it, it gets stronger, and that's how our brain works. Same with positive feedback loops. When you feed it, it gets stronger, and that's how you feed the positive feedback loop, and then eventually you get to your goal or your destination.
What you feed grows, right?
Yes.
Common statement that I quite often hear. And, a big conversation piece these days is around the subject of your comfort zone. And the comfort zone is very intriguing to me because it's something that I've been thinking a lot about with where I used to be and where I am today, and the full confidence that I have with every fiber in my body that the comfort zone is not a circle that can't be expanded. It's not stationary. It's not permanent. It can actually be modified and expanded in many ways. And the biggest way to do it is exactly what you're illustrating with being able to approach someone from the opposite sex and have conversations with them and trying to get their number and all that stuff. Because what happens is once you start getting out of your comfort zone rebuilds itself.
Yes.
And it starts expanding a little bit. And it doesn't mean that that anxiety will be gone forever, especially when you're out of practice. It shrinks again.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
But it allows you to expand. Today, here we are. We have microphones right above our heads. We have a spotlight that's lighting you up right now. It's very hot in here. There's a camera that's staring at you. This is not meant to be a comfortable environment for any human being. Yet we both know that by doing this, we're allowing ourselves to not only get out great content that might help people, but also get ourselves even a little bit uncomfortable.
Yes.
That down the road will make us want to do it more and get better at it and become a student of the game of podcasting and interviewing and all that good stuff. Something that I've been trying quite a bit over the last 2 years. And it's been extremely surprising for me to listen back to episode 1 with cringy feedback, like I hate it because that's how awkward I was. But it was also nice. It made me realize that I can get better at it.
Exactly.
It was a reassurance that I needed that it's like a sport. It's a skill. You work on it and you get better at it, just like everything else that you're trying to improve. And a lot of it comes down to exercising and knowing that getting out of that comfort zone expands that comfort zone. The other thing that you've done really well on stacking is the confidence that you did around your own self-image. You worked on yourself. One of the things that happened during the injury that you had in the past was you weren't working out as actively. You also put on some weight, right? And then
Some weight, yeah, sure. A lot of weight.
I'm trying to be the nice friend here, but Well, anyone that sees your first post on Instagram,
Yeah, that was bad, yeah.
which was the best way to introduce yourself to the world, by the way, was the post of saying, "This is who I used to be and this is who I am today."
Yeah.
And you've done something amazingly well in just a short couple of years that actually inspired me to take on your program and your mentality around fitness. Talk to me a little bit about self-image. When you were in that environment where you had a lot of weight on, what was it that finally motivated you to get that side of you together? And what were the practical things that you did to adjust from having the body in, what was it, 2018, 17, to where you are now?
Oh, actually, it was even 2015.
2015, okay. 5 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, it was 5 years ago. Yeah, and that's another thing. People expect to fall in love with the process, but it really is diligent work. And, when you start something, expect to do it terribly because, it's something new. So when I finally decided to make a change, a couple things happened to wake me up to it. One, I saw the photo because I legitimately thought the laundry machine was shrinking my clothes. That's why they weren't fitting.
Oh my gosh, no one knows. No one really knows until they see their own photo and says like, is that me? Yeah. Was that just a bad angle? Did I choose the wrong filter?
Angle, yeah. Every excuse I could think of. And that's the thing. The first step is acknowledging it, right? Because I was completely unaware.
Yeah.
As soon as I was aware, I was like, okay, something has to change here. And then also I was getting non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And at first I thought it was, this is back before I was studying medicine. I thought it was a sexually transmitted disease because I got a random blood test. And then my family physician's like, you have hepatitis. And I'm like, oh my God, you could get it from sex. So and she cheated on me. I'm like, oh my God, probably got it from there. But then I'm like, okay, I have to change. And the first thing I did was I looked at what needed to change. Everyone says if you quit drinking, you'll lose weight. Not in my case. It was me going to McDonald's like every day. So diet was the focus. And I have a big sweet tooth. So I'm like, okay, what would be a sustainable diet for me? And at the time, it was ketogenic diet. Because I loved meat and I still do. So I'm like, okay, how can I enjoy the foods I'm eating? And it was just that. Finding out, okay, I had to cut out these things, but I can have these things I enjoy. And then trying to find, over time, making micro adjustments to be like, okay, now this is a bit of a healthier alternative. And then learning how to do things better. And that meant actually like taking a look at what you do. Be like, okay, I'm mindful that I do things this way. Maybe I should listen to people that know more than I do. And at the time, I didn't know anyone, but we have the internet, so
so
that
easy.
helped a lot. Yeah. So it's really hard to say the exact process, especially since it was 5 years ago, and I don't remember how I started exactly, but the first thing was acknowledging it.
How long did it take, how many years before you were actually happy with where like your own body image, because you clearly didn't like the way that you looked when you saw that photo.
Oh, right.
So how many years did it take before you were like, okay, I'm starting to like the way I'm looking? You felt more confident when you went out to social environments. You didn't feel as anxious that people were critiquing you from afar. Like, when did you get to that point?
Okay. Well, I think in that, even in the same post I made one 2015 and then made one 2016.
Yeah, the 3 photos.
Yes,
That's right.
right. And then that one, the second one was when I was getting comfortable, and
You can tell,
yeah.
right? You can tell by the clothes that you were wearing that wasn't supposed to be a
Yes.
baggy shirt. Like, they were actually well-fitted shirt, and actually
Yeah.
that's a good sign that you're
Exactly.
okay with it showing the shape of your body.
Yeah. So I think about a year. And then after a year later, that's when I started working out. And then and then a year after that, I got a lot of compliments, and I started getting attention from other people, mainly girls.
That's always
yeah.
a good thing.
Yeah,
That's
always
a
a good
good response. What did they say with working out? Like, first you notice and no one else does, then your friends notice,
Yeah.
but then a lot of the other people notice that don't
Yes.
even know you, and you finally got to that phase, right? Like,
Yeah.
where the other people that have no idea who you are not just appreciating you for the progress,
Yes.
but appreciating you for how you look at that instant moment that they saw you the first time.
Yeah. And, I would talk to people, they would say, well, it's because you have this newfound confidence, right? And I'm like, no, it's because I look better.
Well, let's think about that, because I'm wondering myself, because you're also dressing differently. You're also walking around with like not worried.
Yes.
You're also going to environments where you're okay being
Exactly.
gawked at from a distance,
Yes.
right? Like, so part of me wonders if the attitude adjustment and the way that your lifestyle has modified as a result to give you more of those opportunities to receive those compliments.
Yeah, and also, you feel better, you have more energy, right? And so you can't really quantify that either.
Right.
So it's so
There's so many variables.
there are so many variables. It's hard to say. And then, well, since we're on the topic of self-image, now it's gone the other direction where I'm like, I'm proud of my progress, but not that much. And
This comes back to your
yeah.
statement of you can do better. It's almost like you're
Exactly.
not letting yourself get satisfied till you get to a better level.
Exactly.
So what are your feedback about that? When you look back about the fact that you're in excellent shape, your body fat percentage is at an all-time best, but yet you're still pushing it. Is that a problem? Is that a bad thing for someone? Like, should they actually know where they should stay stationary and try to be in maintenance mode rather than keep trying to work and being unhappy with their level of success?
Yes, that is a very good question, and something I still don't have the right answer to.
See, I don't know that either, right? Because for myself, I've come a long way over the last few years. Like, I still look back at my photo a couple of years ago, and I'm mad at you guys for never actually giving me my wake-up call. Like, Mahfuz, get your shit together. You're getting out of control. You never gave me that.
Yeah,
But you know what? I didn't give you that either, so that's fair. However, I like to think it's because we just love our friends for the way they are,
Yeah,
so we
exactly,
don't
yeah.
try to think of it that way. But I've made a lot of progress, but I've had a
Yes.
goal in mind that I haven't reached yet, and I know it'll take me a few years to get there. So it's not that I'm unhappy with my progress, is that my goal hasn't been attained.
Yes.
And you said something very important, and you said it's in such a nonchalant way because you're trying to make a point, but you said people fall in love with the process, but they need to know it's more than that. And I'd like for you to talk about that, because I know that I've been on this journey for the last 2.5 years, and I still have many years to go. I know that I'm always not excited about it. Sometimes I wish we could go out and do McDonald's again. Sometimes
Yeah.
I'm craving all-you-can-eat sushi, and shout out to COVID-19 from preventing me from
Yeah,
getting that right now.
exactly, yeah.
It's helping me out in some ways. So in your situation, the long game. We talked about the long game last week, actually. It was a
Yes.
fascinating conversation, and I know that you're a big advocate of long game in everything. Talk to people a little bit about what long game means and why it's important, and how to stay consistent when it's not fun.
Right. So the main issue is that people think that you start doing things out of motivation, and they expect that motivation to last. And motivation is an emotion. Emotions don't last. You have to understand that motivation just serves as a purpose to reduce like the activation energy of starting something. So use it as a tool, but don't rely on it. And realize that the process itself is always going to take work. No matter what you do, eventually there's going to be more and more resistance, because you're going to realize that there are the 4 stages of competence, right? The unconscious incompetence, the unconscious competence, the conscious incompetence, and then conscious competence, and then unconscious competence, right? So once you start becoming more conscious that, holy crap, I don't know what I'm doing, or there's so much I still don't know, then it's kind of intimidating, and that actually works as resistance. And if you work through that, and if you know how to work through that, then it becomes more of a process that you can stick to. But the main thing I find that works is, 1, being grateful for the progress you made thus far, 2, acknowledging that it's tough, and 3, some people, it definitely helps to have people also in the same place, or at least in a place higher, and that motivate you. So you can still seek motivation that way. But you have to rely on the fact that it's gonna be tough, and you're gonna have to put in work no matter what it is. Any skill you do is gonna be like that.
And this comes back to what we were saying at the very beginning about the reason we started, right? And sometimes the reason we started is the frequent reminder that during the worst days where you don't feel like getting motivated makes you still push forward, saying like, I can't quit. I'm in too deep.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes that helps the closer you get to your goal. Like if you're 3 years in, you're not going to give up on it as much as you would have in the first year,
yeah.
because you're expecting bigger results quicker. And I think that's something that matters a lot. You know, people these days, like if they can plaster it up on their wall or have it on their vision
Yeah.
board, whatever it is, to frequently remind them, that helps a lot. What are your reminders? What are the things that you keep at the top of your mind? And here's where it gets interesting. I don't think they're all good. Sometimes it's bad memories. Like some of my motivations is that I don't want to be the guy I used to be.
Yeah.
Right? I hated the guy I used to be. And here I am now in a much happier place. I never want to go to that. And I know the only way I can stay away from that is to keep working on myself.
Yeah.
So what are things that drives you that would be the reason, like the reason that you would frequently remember to stay motivated as you go forward?
So I would, first thing as well is to, again, not look at outcomes so much, and focus
Interesting.
on why you started it, not the progress you're making, because eventually the progress is going to slow. But what I find, well, the things that motivate me, that push me harder, it's difficult to say. I remember it's hard to say if I've ever hit rock bottom, because it feels like there are certain periods in my life that are darker and darker, and I can't tell which one's the darkest. But
Yeah.
I remember those moments.
But they all feel shitty, right?
Yes.
It almost doesn't matter which one was the most severe. They all hurt.
They all hurt. And I use that as a reminder of that's what can happen if I let it happen. If I give power to the doubt, or give power to the resistance, then it can overwhelm me. And instead, if I reframe my thinking to be like, this is a challenge, and this is also a test of my will, and I will overcome. And with this, every time I do, it becomes even easier. Now, the resistance is only going to get tougher, but it just makes me that much stronger for that.
Wow. And where are you right now in your mental happiness? Like if 0 was your darkest days and 100 was your over the moon happy, where do you reside right now?
Oh, out of 100. Okay. Wow, it's going to be tough to say. I want to say, in this particular point in my life, maybe 60.
Okay. So that's a huge jump up for some people that are in 0 right now.
Yeah.
Heck, even getting to 50 is impressive, and you're already in between, like halfway home and much closer to your peak happiness.
Yeah.
So let's try to get very practical here. What is the difference? What has changed between 0 to 60? Why are you at 60 right now?
Well, I personally don't like to use happiness as a metric, but
Yeah.
what I find is goals. I find the more you chase a goal, and the closer you get to it, that's where you get the happiness, the little bits of happiness, a little bit of dopamine thrown at you, and then once you adapt and reach those goals, then you've hit other goals that because you realize, hey, I've already reached this point. Let's go for another thing. So the little things, for me that got me to raise my happiness were, going from a place where I was uncomfortable about everything, everyone, socializing, even like with anyone, even my friends, I would get anxious sometimes. And then being like, hey, I can talk to my friends now. Hey, I can smile at a stranger. Oh, hey, like a month ago, I was like sweating. I couldn't eat food in the food court. Now I can hold a fork and my hand's not shaking. Just seeing those incremental changes and then realizing that it's because you put in the effort.
Right, right. And it's interesting because you're almost seeking evidence of things that you've done that results in you feeling like you made progress, right? Like it was the fact that you hit this number on a scale, the fact that these size clothing fit you, the fact that you've made progress and now you've made more eye contact and you're smiling more and you're going out more. It's those little metrics that result in it. But here are my thoughts about goals. Achieving goals is what makes you happy. That's something that you kind of phrase in different ways. And I'm wondering if I agree with the same thing. And I'm debating it in my head right now because the issue that I see with goals is that you're putting yourself in a trap. Like if you get happiness out of just goals,
Right.
I feel like you're putting yourself in a trap where you can never achieve ultimate happiness because it'll be one of the two outcomes. Either you've achieved the goal and now you're like, now what? Like, am I just going to be forever happy or eventually get unhappy? Or you're forever in the pursuit of new goals. So you're putting yourself in a trap where there's just never a finish line where you feel like you can be at peace with it. And I'm wondering if I feel the same way, and I'm not sure if I do. I don't know if it's goal setting or being completely happy with just the way that life is at the moment, that regardless of whether I'm chasing goals or not. And I think goals, it does play a role in it because if I could do anything I wanted today, I would want to do things to build. That's just who I am. I love building and creating new things. I'm a creative that way. But I don't think that would be the only reason. It would be just out of the fact that I had the freedom to do what I wanted today.
Right.
What are your thoughts about that? Do you think goal setting is the underlying thing that results in like whether or not someone should be happy, or is there more to it?
There's definitely more to it. You can't just simplify it in one way. But that's why, again, I go to the point that I don't chase happiness. I chase goals.
Got it.
And happiness is just a byproduct, right? Like, the cliche, the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
So, of course, acceptance is a huge thing. You have to accept the place where you are because if you don't, then there are going to be problems. And of course, appreciating the small things along the way, they help as well, and having that sense of gratitude and having that sense of mindfulness too, also helps compound that. But I'm at a point where I believe that I'm just like, what, screw happiness. I just want to focus on goals, and happiness is a byproduct. I'm not chasing happiness. I'm accepting the fact that I'm going to be miserable, and that makes the misery a little bit less. The suffering, because ultimately I want to become as efficient as possible with my suffering, because with that, all the lessons you attain become even greater with less resistance. And that way, you can maximize the lesson learned and minimize the losses, which is the suffering.
That's so interesting. That is a wild perception. That's not what I expected at all when we were breaking this out. To me, I think that, we sat down one day and we were talking about like how we perceive ourselves versus how others perceive us. And you and I both came out with the same outcome where we realized that we rank ourselves so low versus how other people see us. And then it opened up the debate of like, is that a problem? Like, should we be seeing ourselves as higher, or are we maybe underrating ourselves? And you said something interesting along the lines of like, you like ranking yourself low because it gives you more to work towards.
Yeah.
And it comes back to goal setting. Talk a little bit about that. Like, that mindset is fascinating because I've never heard someone explain that perception to me.
Well, everyone likes a good underdog story, right?
Yes.
But basically, it's if I like having that pressure of thinking that I'm not as smart as I am. It keeps me, one, more open-minded about things, more open-minded about other opinions as well. And two, it keeps me unsatisfied. So it gives me that extra push to go even further. And that also is what fuels those moments when it's really, really tough to go any harder. Like those like moments where you're like, I can't get another rep out of this workout, for instance. It's just being like, well, I'm not good enough, so I can be better if I do it this way.
Yeah.
And it is a lot of pressure to put on yourself. But if you find a good balance and accepting the fact that, you are enough, but you just want to be better.
Yeah.
And if everyone looks at you like you're great and you think that you aren't, that one, it makes you more
It
down to
humbles
earth.
you, yes.
It humbles you, builds your empathy, and also then you're like, okay, if everyone thinks I'm good now, imagine what happens once I get
level
the
up.
next step.
Yes. And I'd much rather be in that situation than the other way around.
Oh,
Yeah. I'm like, I'm the shit, and
Yeah.
no one else thinks that. That's a problem.
Exactly,
That's when
yeah.
you get arrogance and
Yes.
not nearly as productive as you could have been in the other way around. One of the things that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, especially the last few years, is I've tried to transform myself into more of a stop and smell the roses kind of guy. Because sometimes you're building all the time. You're spending so much time on working on yourself that you forget to sit back and actually being like, damn, look at what I achieved. And I use my birthday usually as a day to do that, because I always think back of like, oh, new year,
Yeah.
what did I achieve last year? And I think to myself like, what has I done this year? Like, what am I proud of achieving this year?
Yeah.
But I've found myself, and I've been challenging myself, and I challenge you to do the same, because you work so hard on yourself and you rank yourself kind of low because you want to keep working, that I would love to challenge you to take more moments in your life to sit back and actually appreciate it. Those photos that you put out there, spend some time looking at your photo. Be like, this is where I'm at. Or like
Yeah.
spend some time actually thinking about like listening to some of the music that you're putting together and listen to it. You create some incredible music that we haven't even talked about today, but you're so talented in the arts of music. You got me into buying my first ever acoustic guitar. That hasn't been touched since the first week that I bought it, but it's a nice decorative piece in my house
definitely.
now. But the fact that you've taken that on as like something that you chose to learn and you got really good at it, the challenge is, can you stop, take a step back, and enjoy the masterpiece that you're painting? And is that something that you think you haven't been doing enough, and could you be doing more of it?
Oh, I definitely agree with you. It's a good thing to have, and it's a good thing you've incorporated. I do have a problem looking at things and being like, this is enough, because it never is. I
Yeah.
feel like there's always like, well, you know what? If I were to do it again today, I'm smarter and I could have done it better. So you can always add on, but the truth is, you have to learn how to accept what's going on and what you have. And there are moments where I do appreciate what I've done. I just worry about becoming arrogant or complacent because
True.
of those. And I've seen people fall into the trap of just being like, yeah, what I did is good enough, but then the work is sloppy.
Can't get
because-
satisfied
yeah.
and can't get overconfident.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
like for example, like sequels in movies, for instance, they tend to be worse than the original,
Yep.
right? Or when an artist puts out their debut album, they have all the time and they could focus on little things and they focus on the craft. But then the second one is rushed because one, they don't have as much time, but also because everyone hypes up the first one,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, the second one has to be better, but
It's a mentality
yeah.
in many ways, because it's interesting, because at the first stage, as the artist is introducing themselves to the world and saying, this is where I stand, they're trying to win over the fans.
yes,
No one knows if they're good. They're sometimes doubting themselves of, am I even good? Will people even listen
Yes.
to my music? But then the second album, things become different, especially when they become a multi-platinum selling artist, because now they know that they are liked, and now they know the tables have turned, and they're not trying to win over the fans. The fans are begging them for music. So now they come into the studio with the arrogance of, I know what's good for my fans. Don't challenge me.
Yeah.
I don't want your feedback because I know what's good, and I'm going to put that out there. And more often than not, they weren't paying attention to the market. They didn't pay attention to what the fans really wanted.
Yeah.
Which is why you hear our fans all the time say, I miss the old them.
yeah, exactly,
Right? I miss the old them. I wish it had the first album sound, even like 5 albums later. Because they'll always remember that that's how you introduce yourself to the world.
exactly.
Kamil, the last thing I want to dive into, because I said this at the very beginning, and I feel like I'm going to get my butt kicked online if we don't dive into, which is the topic of heartbreak.
Oh, right.
And you and I have bonded over something that we both have experienced and not a lot of people experience, which is the fact that we got so deep into a relationship. We were absolutely in love with the girl that we were with. We had no doubt that we were starting to picture what our future would look like with that individual. And then we did that wild thing where we mess up our pants by getting on our knees and proposing to the other girl and having an engagement in our calendar. And then you and I had a similar experience where something happened after the engagement and we both had to end our engagement. I shared my story in my book, and there's a lot of thoughts I've given around it. I talk about how heartbreak has actually, in many ways, amplified who I am today in the best way. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on what you experienced? What was your relationship like? But where are you now in the way that it's groomed you into who you are today?
Okay. Well, so the girl I was engaged to, I was dating for 1 month before I proposed. Not 1
1
month.
month?
1 year. Sorry.
Gosh. What did you do? Las Vegas and elope?
Yeah. No, but I actually fell in love with her in the first
month.
In
Okay.
the first month. That's where I
That's
got
not as
confused.
unusual.
Yeah.
I thought you were listening to a little too much Beyonce and you decided to put a ring on it.
Oh yeah, I did like it though, and the problem was she was my first love, and yeah, I fell really hard, and I didn't believe in love before, and the way it was it was so dumb. Like, even I would stand in line with her, I would look at her, and I would even get palpitations, or whenever she sent a text, my chest would get light, almost like when back in my days of overdosing on opioids, like that same feeling. I actually got high, right?
Was it cheaper though?
Oh, it was so much cheaper. No,
Are
actually,
you sure?
Yeah, you know what? You make a good point.
Are you
It cost
sure?
me in the long run. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Wow. And so.
Yeah, you felt a lot. So how people try to describe butterflies in their stomach,
Yeah.
this is actually the feelings that they experience, and
Yes.
you were experiencing it to a full extreme.
Yeah, and I thought it was just impossible. And then, like, I tried to rationalize it. I'm like, oh yeah, in psychology it's called a state of limerence, and that only lasts maximum 18 months, right? So I'm like, okay, this will fade. And it came to a point where I just wanted to go. Like, it's so nice, but it's so addicting, and I can't. And keep in mind, like, I'm studying in another country, so our relationship was long distance for a long time. So when we fell in love, I flew after saying I love you for the first time to her. I flew out a week later, right? And then I stayed there for a couple months. Came back for Christmas, so 3 months.
You've definitely
Yeah.
kept visiting quite often.
Yes.
Actually, I think that's the most I saw you while you were studying in Poland.
Yes.
Because you kept flying back frequently to try to further build that relationship.
Yes, and I was lucky because my school was weird at the time, and we had so many random weeks off. But yeah, I spent
Shout out
a
to
lot-
Poland. I mean, I wish our country took some notes. Let's
Yeah.
get those holidays right,
Yeah.
guys.
Well, even in Poland, like, it wasn't a common thing. It was just our school.
It just
like,
was a setup, yeah.
It was just weird. That particular year was like empty.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were in Poland for quite some time, even before that relationship got that serious.
Yes.
And I could definitely see you putting in the work. Like, you were coming down way more often than you used to.
Yeah.
It was not cheap. I mean, those flight tickets alone. And then on top of that, when you were in town, sometimes I didn't even see you.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
we had
true, yeah.
maybe one call or maybe one short
Yeah.
hangout. So
Yeah.
I knew that you were putting in so much work. And I remember the day you proposed to her or the day that you told me you're about to propose to her,
Yeah.
that the first thing I said to you is that, Kamil, I've never seen you that happy with a girl before.
Yeah.
And I supported it. I gave you the Godfather blessing. I let you kiss the ring. And that was, I was very confident in the
Yeah.
relationship and the work that you put towards it. I had no doubt that you were in love, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah. And I also had no doubt at that time that things would have been perfect. Like, we made all these plans, we figured everything out, and like, I fantasized about the future I had with her, and like, she was in it. Like, usually it's some random supermodel or something, but like, really, she was.
Yeah.
She was that, and yeah, she like possessed me. It was crazy, and unfortunately, what was happening after this, like, the second year is her mom was suffering through breast cancer, and it came to a point where they accepted that she's gonna die sooner, and as a result, as well as the long distance, and I had a lot of pressures too. It's hard to say this without. I'm trying to present it objectively, but it's very
Yeah.
difficult.
I'm also going to say that could it be that the version that you have in your head right now is more that it was Camille's fault rather than the fact that the reality was there was issues on both sides in the relationship,
Yeah,
right? Because part of your growth, which was part of my growth, which is I look back at those relationships and I say, you know what? I freaking love her regardless of what happened.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it happened. So in many ways, I let a lot of those things that she was guilty of, I let it go because I wanted to see the best and I knew that was a way for me to move on. And I'm wondering if the version that you're saying right now, saying, oh, it was my distance.
Yeah.
You know, it was the fact that I understand what was going on with her family and the pressure. I'm not sure I buy that, especially because I knew you that well during that time.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that there was definitely major concerns happening in both sides that put a lot of friction in the relationship.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I tend to try to take the responsibility because that's the mindset I have, and it served me well. However, this is one of the times where I have to admit that I am not being fair and not being honest. And during the relationship, I was very dishonest with myself, in the sense that I thought my boundaries were stupid just because I had boundaries, for instance. And then I deluded myself into thinking that, well, actually, this is what compromise is. Everyone talks about compromise. This is what it is. But these sacrifices I'm making it seemed like it was just not even normal, but like expected. And over time, she would even question, well, what have you done for me? What sacrifices have you made for me? And, you know, it was so shocking to even hear that when she asked that the first time, I couldn't give it an answer because I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'd done everything.
Yeah.
And I felt like I put all my effort, I put everything aside. I didn't see like my friends for the longest time because I wanted to focus on the relationship. But the main issue was I was dishonest with myself. I was dishonest with her because she was a bit insecure, and I was asking, well, is it okay? Am I too much? Am I too much? And is this, that? And I would say things just to comfort her, but not trust that she had the strength to endure how I really feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have the heart to bring it either.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when you had this whole fantasy of what the future looks like.
Yeah.
And the fact that she officially put a ring on it. Like you already solidified that this is what the future is going to look like.
Yeah.
And the amount of legwork and heavy conversations that are going to be required in order to get this idea across.
Yeah.
The honesty is very difficult. And it's almost like, it's almost easier to like go with the flow in that environment. And maybe that's what you were doing at that time.
Absolutely. And I saw her as my ideal person, my everything. And I thought, this is what a man should do. Like, sacrifice everything. Because I thought she was the most amazing person ever. Like, she was the virtue of everything I wanted in a person. And that she was pure and innocent. And that by virtue of being me and all the shit I went through, I'm corrupting her. And I wanted to save her from myself, essentially. From my own selfish desires. Because she was just pure.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, I stopped taking care of myself. And she couldn't take care of me because I wouldn't let her.
Mm-hmm.
She wouldn't reach me, and stress got huge because on top of that, med school, studying there at the distance, I had a cancer scare. They removed the lymph node, which actually they removed the wrong one, but I even thought I was gonna have to go through chemo, and I had to put med school on pause for that. And then when her mom died, I just kind of accepted that, she's going to be emotional, and she became a bit more aggressive, and I became an emotional punching bag for her. And I accepted it at first, but then after after a month and a half, I started saying this is not okay. And the more resistance I gave her, and the more I pushed back to secure my own boundaries, she went even harder. And she knew one of my triggers was shame, and she was really good at using that to her advantage. And it was to the point where I've known I was with her for 2.5 years, and for 8 months
You just
I
took
was
it.
unhappy.
Yeah.
I
And
was
you didn't just
really
necessarily
unhappy.
take it. You tried to find a way to get back to the happier part of your relationship, but
Yes, I
it
did.
was almost like you went too far off the deep end, that you
Yeah.
couldn't get back no matter what you tried. And you
Yeah.
tried. I remember that you tried with the way that you were approaching, with the different types of conversations, with just trying to be completely open about it and honest. And it seems like nothing was working at that time.
Yeah. And I forgot to mention, even, and I was studying for the most important
That's
exam
right.
of my life, and I was putting in 8 hours a day studying, on top of that doing, shadowing doctors for 12 hours a day sometimes. It was really challenging. And yes, I was putting in the effort. I was, telling her how I feel. I was staying up late nights, even to 4 a.m.
Yeah.
sometimes, just trying to console her, or trying to, you know, not argue with her, but to settle an argument
Right.
without compromising the boundaries that I need. And it was difficult to reach her.
Sometimes I also wonder if the arguments were dragged on to be as long as they are because that resulted in more time on the phone with her, right?
Yes.
Because you're a busy guy, and if there wasn't an argument, it would have been hanging up the phone and sleeping.
Yes.
So maybe that was another mentality, that was also another motivation to keep that going.
Yeah. And also because hanging up, to me, felt like giving up.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
and also I did try hanging up once, and it's hard to to use a new pattern of behavior and establish that as this is a consequence of your actions, because then it can be misconstrued as manipulation or something like that. And you know what, it even just broke my heart doing that. But the main thing I wanted to touch on with her in general, with the 8 months of unhappiness, so 1/3 of a relationship in unhappiness,
One third. Wow.
is that I wasn't good to her either. Like, after a while I lost myself,
Yeah.
and I didn't know who I was. I didn't recognize who I was.
It was interesting because, and I know we talked about this even off camera, but your relationship with your friends was different. And it wasn't just because you weren't there, it's because when you were present, you weren't present,
Yeah.
right? Like when you were there, you weren't really there. You were tapped out, you were checked out, your mind was off somewhere else. You took strolls to answer phone calls and deal with shit.
Yeah.
When we're together and she was there with you, you felt almost responsible to make sure that she felt comfortable the entire time.
Yeah.
And there was that part of our friendship where like there was a huge disconnect, but I didn't realize any of this was happening until much later when you told me that this was what was happening. So I was still in the background rooting.
Yeah.
I was like, I want them, they're planning their happily ever after. I want to support whatever needs to be done to get there. But
Yeah.
it was interesting when you finally told me everything that was happening behind the relationship, that it opened my eyes to all the things
Yeah.
that I kept, like all the things that was happening when I saw you. It started almost putting those puzzle pieces together of understanding why you were acting the way that you were.
Yeah.
But where I wanted to go into now is, first of all, what was the line? Where was the final moment, and what was, after taking it for 8 months, what made you at that specific moment finally decide that you needed to end this? And then I also want to talk a little bit about your learnings and your growth from it, because that's the point I want to drive home from this.
Right. So, for New Year's Eve, we went nearby for a skiing trip, and and everything was good. Everything was great, actually. And then the final night, there was an argument because it's
It was
so
silly, right? It was a venue
was.
change.
I
think.
I can go and I'll you know what? Fuck it. I'll just say it.
Yeah.
So we we wa- we decided we had a reservation for venue in building, and then it turned out it wasn't so good. So I suggested that why don't we check the bar that's in the same building just on the other side, and we had to walk outside and around in there. Everyone okayed it, and I even checked with her like twice, like, is it okay? Because it was her idea for that particular venue, but we switched. So we're walking outside, and I was walking ahead of her, and then
The
when we all
nerves.
and yeah, oh my
How
God,
dare you?
God forbid that what if she slipped on the ice and she's wearing high heels and I should have at least looked back and I should have held her hand and make sure she was okay.
The craziest part is that's what she said to you.
That is exactly what
Yeah.
she said to me. And then she's like, "No, go hang out with your friends. I'll be here." And then obviously I was like, "Well, no, we had to talk about this." And then that evolved to an argument, and we had to pretend that everything was okay. Then when we went back to the Airbnb, we went to bed angry, and the next morning we had to drive back. And the drive was how long again? Like 3 hours?
Yeah, I think it's 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, 2 or 3 hours. Throughout the entire 2 to 3 hours, she was screaming at the top of her lungs how unhappy she was with me. And it was to the point, like, she even said that I, saying all these things, like, I don't love her, I'm probably cheating on her, the same typical things she brought up all the time. And I wasn't responding at all. I just stopped. I was just focused on driving, no response whatsoever. I was just done. Like, I was like, you know what, I'm not going to encourage this kind of behavior anymore. It's even like parents use that on children. It's called extinction.
That's right.
And then she even said the worst thing she said was, "You make me want to kill myself," and it wasn't the first time she said that. And like, I have tried to kill myself many times in my life.
Mm-hmm.
She knew it too, and I know what it takes to get down there,
Mm-hmm.
and to feel responsible for that feeling in someone else is the biggest. It's so shameful for me. It is like the thing I want to avoid most.
Like the ultimate worst thing in this
Yes.
situation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the worst
Mm-hmm.
feeling to have. And for 3 hours she was screaming at the top of her lungs. I even had to stop by for gas, and she calmed down when I was paying, but then as soon as I walked in again, and I'm talking about screaming at the top of her lungs.
I thought she like I
Crying.
thought you were gonna say she like rolled down the window while you're filling up the gas while continuing her train of thought, which would have been amazing.
Oh yeah, I don't want to make fun of her, and I
No,
don't
no,
wanna
I get it.
sound-
I get
yeah,
it.
but
Listen, man,
I
like,
know, yeah.
there's no doubt that the worst things were being said in that
Yeah.
ride. Was this the first time that it happened to that extreme that it finally made you put your foot down?
It happened once before, but it wasn't as aggressive towards me. It was basically she was working on my shame again, because the first time it happened was she bought me a stuffed animal, and I wasn't particularly excited to have the gift.
How dare you?
Yeah, but I was like, no,
How
thank
dare
you.
Was it a teddy bear?
It was a teddy bear.
How dare
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, Valentine's Day too. But
I mean, there's some validation there, man.
yeah, I know. I'm an asshole. I really deserved all of
Yep.
that.
Like, it's extreme, man. The things that she was saying is extreme, and I also know that you're thinking twice about all the things she said and whether you should air the laundry here. So I don't want you to feel like you have to say everything she said.
Yes.
But you finally put your foot down, and
Right.
at that moment you decided that you wanted to end the relationship. Was that done on the trip, on the way there?
No, it wasn't. What happened was we on the way to the trip, actually, I forgot to mention, she was just asking things about the wedding, and the whole time, like, I was just trying to talk to her about it, because the rule was, after I graduate, we'll get married. But the actual real original rule was, once she's in law school, then we'll get married. But subsequently, she didn't go to law school, and she was working as a paralegal, and so she brought up the wedding again. I forget how it was, and then I made a comment that, like, well, we had to talk about it, and that kind of
Set the
sparked
tone.
her,
Yeah.
sparked her, be like, why can't we talk about it now, kind of thing, like. And I'm saying, like, we're gonna have a good weekend. Let's leave it at that. Let's have a good weekend. And so when we were driving back from the trip, we agreed to meet the next day to talk about our relationship and what needs to change. And she was saying it like in a point of, you need to change. This isn't right for me. And it felt like she completely disregarded me and my feelings.
And the whole situation of
And the
like,
whole
could it have
situation.
been more than just the fact that you had an issue, like there was an issue at hand, like maybe it was the way that they reacted in the
Yeah.
situation.
And yeah, and like, and to imagine, like 3 hours of her screaming at me, and then the end, like, we're gonna have to talk about the relationship because something needs to change, and it's you.
Yeah.
She didn't say that, but in kind of authoritative tone. And so that night, I've had several times too, when I was in Poland, where I would, throughout the relationship, because we would fight after her mom died, we would fight every 3 days. Well, she would yell at me every 3 days. And then I would wake up in the middle of the night and actually write down, break up with her.
Yeah.
And then go
That's
back
wild.
to bed. But then this time, I was thinking about it really seriously. And I realized that I let this happen for so long. I'm like tired all the time. I can't go to sleep. I'm stressed out. I'm losing hair, everything. And that's when I realized that it's my fault. I let it happen. And why did I let it happen? Because I wasn't aware of what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I was dishonest with myself. I was dishonest with her. I had no integrity. And when I started realizing that this is not right, and I don't know who I am anymore, and I have to find out who I am from scratch, then that's what drove me to do it. This is not right, and it feels like I'm dying the longer I'm in here.
Mm-hmm. And then when you finally did it, I know that it wasn't something that you got over quickly, especially when you think back about everything that you invested. You spent so much time in this interview today talking about how you felt when you were in love, how you felt when you pictured the fantasy of your future with her.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you wake up that next morning and you had a realization that none of that was going to happen anymore. I know you didn't get over that immediately, but how were you feeling back then? And then eventually, how did you manage to get over it, and what have you taken out of that relationship?
Yeah, so back then it was brutal. Actually, like the 2 days after I broke up with her, I flew back.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I would argue that helped. That
Yes.
not only did
No,
you
no, it
give
did.
physical distance between
Yeah.
between you and her, but also like the mental distance of actually
Yes.
giving yourself time to recharge.
Yeah, and the change of environment helped as well. And then something happened with my flight, so I had to take a taxi for 4 hours. I was thinking the whole time. And that first night, I got back to my room, and I forgot, but I had a corkboard with a collage I made of all her photos. And what I did was I just punished myself. I looked at each photo, and I had a package of love letters we've written, and like I had to say the stack is about like 20, and like like journals she made, like 14 reasons why I love you for Valentine's Day, like everything. And I read through each letter again, and I read through all of it, and I just went into this period of self-loathing and just like hating myself. And I look back on it now and I saw it as punishment, but now I saw it as just a reminder that this is what happens when you're dishonest.
Right.
Like, this is the
That's a good lesson.
ultimate punishment. And
Yeah.
you have to feel it. You have to have this lesson stick.
Right.
Because when everything's good and everything's great, but you're not having integrity, then over time you're creating this problem that's never addressed, and it just gets bigger.
Wow. Wow. So I always talk about how a very obnoxious statement that I say, which is I hope that every human being experiences heartbreak once in their life.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that. And I say it once because no one really needs to hurt themselves over and over again. But that first time that it happens, it's an incredible lesson because, like the one that you just said, there's so many lessons, but one of them is around being honest to yourself. And no one will really understand the consequences of dishonesty until they feel the wrath on the other side when they're following through with the dishonesty. And it's incredible that you get that to that extreme. But where I'm a big fan of is the rebuilding yourself, which essentially resulted in my phrase of reinventing yourself, which is you're now shattered in a million pieces. You're all over the place. You're mentally not there anymore because all these memories that you packed your head with of happiness is now erased because you were so heavily reliant on the other human being. And now you're picking those pieces up and you're rebuilding. And it allows you to become stronger, wiser, more emotionally stable, more honest in many ways. Yeah. You're in a much better place right now. Much better place. You made a lot of progress. That breakup happened at the beginning of this year, on New Year's, as you said.
Yeah.
And now it's been many months since, and you are much healthier, not only physically, but emotionally, very confident back in the way you communicate. And I thought there was no better time to bring you on this interview because of that, because you've almost come full circle now that it's a good time to reflect.
Yeah.
So where I want to end this interview, as I'm starting to think we got to eventually think of a time to do a part 2 somewhere down the road, because we just started diving into this. But what is the biggest takeaway that you got out of your heartbreak that you hope that someone else that's maybe going through that as well can learn in their relationship?
Think about, is what you want really what you want, or what is expected of you to want? Because the distinction is everything. Mm-hmm. And you can run with the expectation of what you want as your desire, but that's, again, lacking integrity and being dishonest. And how to do that is to become more mindful. Like, just even of your surroundings at first, and then eventually of your feelings and your thoughts. And then have that translate into, what do I really perceive? What do I really want to happen for me? And express it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and expressing is huge because it essentially leads to dishonesty and lack of transparency in the relationship, where two people may want completely different things, and that just wasn't communicated in the first place.
Yeah.
Kamil, a lot of people are going to ask me what your Instagram handle is because they want to continue following along with your journey. But first of all, what is your Instagram handle? Let's talk about that.
Okay. So it is hashtag. Is it hashtag?
At
Is it
sign.
at? Yeah.
That's
See,
how easy it is
that's
to
how I
Instagram.
knew. Yeah. Thank you.
He thinks your username is a
Cut
hashtag.
it out. Cut it out.
We'll edit that part out, maybe.
Yeah. Dogmatic dormancy.
Yes, and you have just started your Instagram account. You're very fresh, and you stated to me that you're still trying to discover the way that you want to approach social media. Yeah. But if someone was to follow you today, what do you think that they can look forward to seeing more of as your journey starts evolving on Instagram?
Well, honesty, a reflection of my experiences and my stories and the lessons I've taken away from that, and how I'm using those same lessons to the challenges facing ahead of me, because they're constantly being tested. And also seeing that I'm not perfect. I falter along the way, but it's through those little failures that you can also learn from. And that's what I hope people get.
Incredible. I'm definitely one of your primary followers, which I'm super proud of saying. I'm a day one follower, but I'm excited. I hope people continue keeping up with your journey, man. And I want to thank you so much for coming out, as someone that I've known for so many years, that I've definitely paraphrased either your stories or your knowledge that you've passed on to me, to many conversations and content that I put out there. And I have definitely truly believe that you are one of the primary people that I can thank as a reason of where I am in my life right now. And you've been a massive influence for me. But the fact that you decided to come on here as your first appearance on the world of social media, and you're so transparent, the amount of honesty that came out of this podcast interview might be, without a doubt, my most honest and ruthlessly transparent podcast interview that I've ever done thus far. And I want to commend you for doing that. And I'm so excited to keep up with your journey, man.
Thank you so much for having me. And
cheers, brother. I wish I could tell you there was something stronger in this glass, but
yeah, definitely.
water will have to do the trick. Thank you for your time.